From writing and producing for iconic shows like Will and Grace and Family Guy to his hilarious Instagram account, Gary Janetti has created a lasting name for himself in the world of comedy. His new book, Start Without Me, I'll Be There in a Minute, gives us a peek inside his early childhood growing up in Queens, New York, and his comedic influences. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. So great to have you here in studio with us.
Thanks, Lindsay. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So two really meaningful chapters in particular. You talk about your mom and aunt sharing stories about your grandmother and also your neighbor, Irene. Talk to us about these women and how they really had such an influence on you.
Oh, well, my grandmother, died right before I was born, and my mom never really talked about her. She had lost both her parents very early, so it was something that we could never talk about. You learn as a kid, it's an upsetting topic. And I think I got to a point, I was writing this second book, and it's about moments in my life that I still kind of remember. And I thought, I still think about that my mom couldn't talk about her grandmother, and I want to know about her and what her story was, and it was a way to kind of honor her.
And how about your neighbor, Irene?
I don't like neighbors now. It feels like, I know it's crazy, I don't know how people are, but I will do anything to avoid saying hello to my neighbors. When we leave the house, if I hear people out, I'll be like, wait inside for another minute before we get in the car. Now we can go. Now it's I'll wait on the corner before I pull in. And I wanted to write about, that whole feeling about kind of being friendly, but always, good fences make good neighbors kind of a thing. And then I was like, I had the best neighbor in the world when I grew up. The woman next door to me, Irene, who since passed away, was a second mother to me. I was a lonely kid, and it was a safe place, her house and her. And I still think about her, all the time. And I'm like, how ironic that I don't want to talk to neighbors, but the closest person in my life outside of my parents was my next door neighbor, Irene. And it was also kind of, maybe there's something about like, I already had the best neighbor I could ever have, so I don't need any more.
Can't even try and top Irene. Well, you just said something that was interesting, Gary, that you were a lonely kid. And really, you've already had so much success as a comedic writer, from Family Guy, Will and Grace, Vicious. But you say how during your summer vacations, you really were happiest just spending it in the basement alone, watching a Happy Days, and the Carol Burnett Show, Charlie's Angels. How do you think that ultimately informed your writing in comedy?
I watched so much TV, Lindsay, like I watched it all the time, and it was almost like my parents were worried about how much I watched, but they didn't, monitor TV in the 70s like you do now. Like I was watching adult programming, when I was like 6 years old, I was watching Maude. And it was only years later that I realized when I first started writing sitcoms in my 20s, I was like, my brain's already wired like this. Like the rhythms were kind of burned into my head. And it was kind of my education, if you will, and that it helped me. It was as Malcolm Gladwell will say, my 10,000 hours were spent watching TV.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so you had a commencement speech where you were talking to kids who were about to go out into the world, and how you had once been terrified of failure. What did you ultimately discover? And can you give us an example of a time when you maybe failed, but you were saying, I'm glad I at least tried that?
And the commencement speech in the book which is funny, it's a fake commencement speech that people have thought that I've given, because it's ridiculous things I say about all the things that you majored in college, all of that nobody cares anymore. Like, that was actually nonsense. Like, this is what matters. But yeah, I think fear of failure, for so many people, we don't do things because we're afraid of, if we fail, it's somehow like humiliating or whatever the thing is, so it's easier not to put yourself out there. But I failed with so many things. In TV, you have to keep trying. There are so many failed pilots, so many failed shows that don't get on. And it's like you just kind of have to keep going. And sometimes, you learn most, from your failures and what not to do going forward.
How do you find, and what's the material basically for your hilarious Instagram account? You have more than 930,000 followers, and I was just scrolling through today looking at, one, I think was my favorite, was like, there's nothing more pathetic than, did you get my email?
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that, so it made me feel like
pathetic question one can ask is, did you get, nobody wants to have to be reduced to asking, did you get my text? Did you get my email? Because obviously we got it, It's like, I just kind of think of things, it just started with me sitting in Starbucks, kind of trying to, just kill time while coffee instead of a crossword puzzle, trying to amuse myself and see sometimes if you connect with people. Often in TV, it takes a long time for something to get from your head to the screen. And on social media, you know, you can just think it and then suddenly it's out there. And it's kind of a neat way to kind of just get your thoughts out. And I found that people share my thoughts through it.
And how did you end up with this fascination with the royal family? Because you often talk about that, even take on the persona of 8-year-old Prince George.
You know, it's not, I never cared about them or even gave them a second thought. I just saw a photo once of George and he looked so precocious and I was like, he had such an attitude. I thought, oh, I could write, you know, I kind of have an idea of a character for that. So I just kind of turned it into a character and then it all kind of grew from that.
Gary, so fun to be able to chat with you tonight. Really appreciate you coming on the show. And to our viewers, his new book, Start Without Me, I'll Be There in a Minute, is now available wherever books are sold.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Good luck to you with the book.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.